Before we get into what's not working, the report did highlight something that is. Where has the deployment of the National Guard in D.C. been most successful?
So it's hard to say exactly where it's been most successfully geographically because we don't have a lot of information on actually where National Guard troops are deployed to physically within the city. When we're talking about crime, what crime has been most affected by the National Guard presence, it appears that a lot of their effect, and it is a positive one. I don't want to diminish the work that the National Guard has done to reduce crime, but most of that crime that's been reduced has been low-level property offenses, and it's been a fairly significant reduction in low-level property offenses of about 34%.
But the numbers in the report don't seem to indicate that there's been a change in violent crime as a result of the Guard. Can you tell me sort of the working theory around why that might be?
Yeah, violent crime is really sticky, particularly in big cities like DC that have long histories of entrenched violence. Violence, particularly gun violence, tends to travel along the pathways of interpersonal relationships, whereas the sort of property offenses that are being potentially stopped by the Guard presence are mostly opportunistic crimes. They don't necessarily have a specific intended victim. Rather, they have someone has a motivation to perhaps take something from a business or a car, and they're looking for a good opportunity to do that. And when you have more boots on the ground, be they National Guard troops or police officers or whatever uniformed presence you want to talk about, there's fewer opportunities to commit that sort of opportunistic crime with impunity. And so we think that that's the working theory around why the Guard's presence has affected property crime, but maybe not violent crime.
You actually sort of segue into my next question for you when you talk about boots on the ground. And we just saw in Mauricio's reporting the FBI has been working on its plan for America 250 for quite some time. And so there's obviously things that we see and there's a lot of things that we don't see. The National Guard, however, are very visible. Double that number in town to 5,000 as the president aims to do, and that will certainly do that. So what did you find about the cost of Guard deployment and what kind of return the federal government is getting on that investment?
Unfortunately, the Guard cost a considerable amount of money to deploy and maintain in DC. It's, I think, the highest cost per soldier deployment in the country, and that largely reflects DC's high cost of living. The Guard is a very expensive and forgive me for saying fairly blunt instrument to use against the type of entrenched crime problems that DC has. We run a cost benefit analysis that suggests that simply increasing the number of police officers would yield a better return on your money. That's a little bit difficult to do. Obviously, MPD has had a long history with having trouble maintaining staff levels. But we also say that you could get even more return for your investment if you took the same number of cops we have now on the street and just simply help them do their jobs better and more safely. We consider that this would probably be an order of magnitude better a return on investment than what you'd see out of the National Guard.
And currently, just to be clear, your report cites over the $1 million mark per day currently of what the government, the administration is allocating towards National Guard presence in the District of Columbia. Is that correct?
Correct. I think we estimate somewhere around $600 per day, a little bit over for a National Guard member versus the average MPD officer costing somewhere between $350 and $400. So it's significantly less expensive to simply hire a new police officer or get more out of the police officers you currently have.
And if you look further down the road, let's say to the 4th of July, all of the days surrounding that big celebration and having an increased presence of National Guard members in and around town, do you think that will do what the president hopes it will?
It's hard to say. Every policy decision is a mix of the numbers, reacting to the data you have, and also considering the politics overplaying the situation. So it's really hard to guide a policymaker to the right decision with just the data. I do want to point out one thing that I think is perhaps contributes to the slightly more positive story about the National Guard, which is a finding that is a little bit buried in our paper, but I consider to be really interesting. And that is that there seems to have been a fairly significant reduction in shot spotter detections when the Guard deployed. And what ShotSpotter is a system of acoustic microphones that pick up and record when a probable gunshot has happened, and it geolocates it, and it allows police to investigate in real time the incident. It also allows police to sort of triangulate where suspects might have been when a crime was committed. But beyond that, it also just gives us a really good measure over time of how many times a gunshot is happening in the city. And when the Guard deployed, and this is something that we have really only basic theories for, when the Guard was deployed, there was a significant reduction in the number of gunshots detected, even though this didn't show up in fewer people necessarily being hurt or killed. So when you look at days like the 4th of July or New Year's, you see days when there is a lot of sort of incidental, perhaps wanton, perhaps negligent discharge of firearms. And it's possible that the National Guard presence may actually reduce that sort of dangerous behavior that doesn't necessarily get recorded in crime stats. So I think there's some reason to feel positive about the National Guard going into the holidays, and about what they can do for safety in DC. I want to again say that they are a very expensive way to combat this problem, and we should be considering less expensive local solutions when possible.
Richard Hahn with the Niskanen Center. Richard, thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks again.